welcome everyone to this month's installment of To Catch a Fraudster. For those of you that are first-time attendees, I'm Tom Cronkright, one of the co-founders, executive chairman of CertifID, and we have Tyler Adams, who is another co-founder and the CEO. We haven't been together on one of these in a while, and I'm so excited. The goal of our time today, as with any of the webinars, is to bring you kind of fresh insights and perspective on how to keep transactions safe and what that means internally for your teams, what that means for your referral partners, and most importantly, what the extension of that looks like for the communities that you have the privilege to serve. So with that, this will be no exception. Tyler, good to see you, man.
Hey, thanks for the invite, Tom. This is great to be a guest. I'm excited. This is going to be fun.
Oh, yeah. This is awesome. All right. So what we're going to dive into today and really voice over is our annual State of Wire Fraud Report. So at a high level, what we've committed to over the last several years is to look back at the year in review and start to ask the industry and buyers and sellers what their experience was in the real estate transaction vis-a-vis fraud threats, concerns, things that may have impacted one way or another that transaction motion. And we really start to focus in on fraud and the solicitation, the actual frauds, their experience and their knowledge with fraud. I can tell you, and I think Tyler would agree, in the years that we've been doing this one had some really interesting texture, and we're not driving a hypothesis each year. What we do is we hire a third party, we administer a series of questions across the country, and that data gets assembled and packaged and then delivered in a way that you're seeing it kind of raw. We're even sharing the questions with you. So Tyler, any other backdrop on why we've been doing this? Otherwise, we'll start to jump in.
No, I mean, I'm just excited to jump in. Like you mentioned, being able to put forward a very objective view from insights from actual people who have gone through the home closing process recently is such a gift, I feel like, that we're able to see that data and, excited to be able to share it with this audience.
So I think as a reminder, what we're seeing this year, we're a full 3+ years into a higher rate environment, lower transaction activity. I think we've seen more life moments than in years past driving somebody entering or exiting a transaction. And when we look at this from a certified perspective, and Alta and other trade groups, but especially Alta are pulling this thread as well, is we're beyond the protection of marketable title transferring to seller to buyer into consumer protection. And rather than thinking of it in terms of, the lender has a last name and the realtor thinks of an address and title thinks of a file number, it's, the Smith family and the Jones family, and it's their life savings, either the commitment of buying or the nest egg. I looked at a stat recently, and it was like half of U.S. wealth for most households is sitting in equity, and we're protecting the unlock of that. Cybercrime, I don't know, Tyler, if you want to voice over this one, but everything continues to be up and to the right. So this isn't a surprising stat. What is surprising, that's actually a step up trend line between 23 and 24. We'll have the 25 report out momentarily from the IC3. If you just extrapolate that number, then by 2030, we're approaching the number 40 billion. It's like 38 some billion on that growth curve. And we'll explain some of the things as to why. Know that real estate just continues to be a focal point for international crime syndicates like at scale. So we've topped over 400,000 as the median existing home price. This isn't new or commercial where they're migrating into. This is just existing rooftops that are trading between sellers and buyers. They're almost pitch perfect now on like the timing, and they really understand the whole transaction cycle, who's communicating, how they're communicating, what's a most realistic time frame and message to approach a buyer for EMD or cash to close, and how do I influence the disbursement payment motion to get diverted into fraudulent accounts. And I think the biggest learning that we've had as we've been out and about nationally speaking and networking is just this lack of framework from a security perspective. So we're not aligned on how we're sharing transaction level information, how we're sharing, PII and wiring instructions and things like that. And I think that's the vulnerability that they know and that they take advantage of. So, Tyler, anything you backfill on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like this slide hasn't changed, right? Like we've known
Right.
that the transaction values are high, that everything's public, that there's a lot of parties. And to your point, I think, and the data will show that it's not a matter of, oh, we didn't know this could happen, or oh, we weren't aware that this was a heavily targeted area. It's really more of a matter of like, how do we close up the gaps in the vulnerabilities? And I think, hopefully some of the data in here will just highlight the need to continue to collaborate and to reach across, the aisle to the real estate agent and to your consumers. And, all of these gaps are going to continue to be exploited, and fraudsters are going to continue to find ways to get involved in these transactions. If we don't work together in a lot of ways. But I think the big takeaway for me is that, there's no new squares on this one. They're all the exact same things that we've been aware of for a long time. And unfortunately, the fraudsters have just continued to find ways to leverage them.
I think the other, I'll put you on the spot. You've traded a couple houses in the last few years. Tyler, has that played out for you? I mean, you sit in a very obviously interesting seat on what you're doing daily. But I haven't been in market. You've been in market, right?
Yeah,
so.
yeah. No, I mean, look, like it's still the most archaic purchase that it feels like you could possibly go through. And the amount of communication, that takes place between all the different parties involved and the handoffs from lender to real estate agent to title company. It makes sense. You go through it and you're like, of course, this is why, there's so much fraud. And I get the benefit of understanding and being prepared for that transaction. Whereas the vast majority of the nation doesn't have I mean, there's more awareness now than ever, which is also something that I was excited to see in some of this data, which we'll share here soon. But I think the mechanisms in which we communicate, we exchange information, we just got to do a better job to be able to put a stop to these vulnerabilities that the fraudsters take advantage of. And I know we're probably about to talk about AI, but like AI is absolutely supercharging this ability to exploit those vulnerabilities.
So let's pull that thread. What have you seen in maybe yours or heard in your sphere, and then what concerns should the industry have about this whole AI enablement on fraud over the last several years?
Yeah, I mean, look, AI is the buzzword in every industry, and I think for ours specifically, there's a lot of good, hopefully a lot of businesses taking advantage of it to speed up workflows and to improve their communications and handle some remedial tasks that previously took a lot of manual effort. I think on the fraud side, though, these guys have been leveraging AI to enhance their phishing attacks first and foremost. And so, I mean, Tom, I remember when you and I were giving presentations to the whole industry about what misspelled words to look out for and grammatical errors. Like we used to have on screen, highlighted words telling people, here's what to look for. This is when you're going to know. And I mean, that was 5 years ago. It wasn't that long ago that was like some of our education to the industry. And I remember people thanking us, being like, oh yeah, the word kindly was used in these emails and it tipped me off because you guys told me about it. And it's just like,
right. Yeah, just a single word.
Yeah, right. And like that stuff's gone. emails that are being sent by fraudsters are probably more professional than the ones like that might be your cue, is like, did this look like it got written by somebody more professional? Maybe it's fraud. And so I think that there's, a lot that they're taking advantage of in terms of the polish of the approach, but then it's also just the scalability of the approach. When you think about a fraudster being able to exploit a home buyer or a seller or a real estate agent, they might have had to go do more manual tasks of like, I sort through all the homes that are on Zillow, I look for what's under contract, and then I'm going to start to attack. Now it's like you create an AI that literally is just scraping every single piece of information possible on every single listing service and going back and then auto creating phishing attacks and emails to be able to go after these, just everyone all at once. And I think that that's the thing that is hard to wrap your head around. Unless you don't have good email filters, you're probably feeling it yourself in your own emails these days and your own text messages with just how much stuff is getting thrown at you. And the vast majority of it, I'd argue, has some threat behind the curtain. And I just think that we're going to only continue to see that because it's cheap and it's easy. Why not have the AI agent run all night long in an attempt to try to get you access to email inboxes? Of course they're going to do that.
Right. No different than a sequence that you would send on a market. I mean, they're doing the same thing. They just retarget and retarget and retarget. I read an article recently from Anthropic that obviously owns Claude, where they had tracked essentially an AI-enabled full attack that adjusted itself in real time to the security defenses that were put in place with very little bad actor engineering or input, and it just went completely end to end. It stopped, adjusted itself, and then went back through a different attack vector. So,
well, I mean, look, you think about you and I have both published some videos over the last couple of months of us doing the deep fakes and impersonating each other. And it's a lot of fun and it catches people's eyes, but even that maybe hasn't really hit the mainstream, where I think we're sort of just trying to warn folks of look how good it is now and what could come. But their ability to create fake IDs and fake documents and fake deeds, I mean, that is here now. I mean, those guys are executing that at scale today. And so, I think that we're only going to continue to live in a world where we really have to verify to trust instead of the old adage, which was like trust but verify. I think that that's completely been flipped on its head.
No, I think you brought up some good points there. I want to go back through. One is, I think it has democratized the ability to enter our industry as a bad actor with almost no barrier to entry. And when we started Certified, Tyler, there were somebody paid domestically to feed whatever that understood a transaction on a table funded versus an escrow versus an attorney versus a whatever jurisdiction. You had somebody boots on the ground. They don't have that anymore, right? And to your point, the kind of final bastion of trust was the identity, was that passport, or 9 times out of 10 the driver's license. And now you can just subscribe to a platform and issue anything synthetically in any form of jurisdiction in any type of document. I presented my driver's license in Michigan. Now you want my US passport? Whoop, no problem. Here it is. Yeah. And I'll flat lay it on a piece of carpet to make sure makes it look like I took a picture of it, and the whole thing is fake. Yep. The voice. My biggest concern, and I know they're using this, is replicating the voice of a trusted person, depositing that or dropping that into directly somebody's, inbox. They listen to the voicemail, directs them to the email, and then you have just primed activity. So, all right, let's get into the report. Enough hyperbole from Tom and Lauren, or from Tyler and Lawrence, or Tyler and Tom. I'm sorry, two partners here. All right, you can see that we have, from a visibility, really scaled in how much Certified sees across the roughly 4 million units that are traded on the residential side per year. So what I like to say here is like, we've seen the thing. We know that business email compromise continues to grow. What we'll show you is that consumer sentiment and consumer expectations are changing significantly, both in their education and awareness, and they're willing to partner and pay for protection.
Well, and I'll just double down on this slide specifically just to say that, like, you know, when you do an annual report like this for the first time, you're like, was the data real? Like, are we sure? How did it work? You do it a second time and you start to have a little bit of pattern and a little bit more confidence. But by the third time, you're like, all right, we got, like, we can trust what we're seeing. We feel confident in the responses, in the efficacy of the actual report. And so I think that was what was the big unlock for us as a team as this data came back in year 3 of doing it. That makes it, you know, really clear, hopefully, for the audience of where the industry is at and where consumers are at in this journey.
So let's dive into it. We'll spend more time on some segments and less on others, but know that, you know, we were over 1,400 respondents that span mostly consumers as well as real estate professionals. So those would be agents, brokers, title companies, closing attorneys. What I find about this slide, and Tyler, you can give me your interpretation, up to the right, is that they know that fraud is out there and they have experienced it or had somebody close to them actually experience a fraud. So you're walking around, 8 out of 10 people that you see in the grocery store, that you're seeing on the highway, they just know it. 6 out of 10 know that it could impact them. So now they're personalizing it to say, okay, in this transaction, that I could be at risk because I know about this other thing that put me or somebody I'm close to at risk. And half of them are changing behavior because of it. And I was just explaining this to a large group of brokers last week. And I said the one thing that a buyer or seller shouldn't have to decide between is convenience and security as it relates to their funds. In this world, that's not a trade that they should have to be forced to make. And this slide is saying that they're concerned. Half of them are very concerned. Tyler, what stood out when we had this data come back?
Yeah, I mean, that last point that you just talked about, I think, is the biggest one for me. That user behavior is changing as a result of risk. And I think that that's a clear indication that your business is going to be impacted in some form or fashion. Closings get delayed, people calling more, there be more interruption. There's also part of me that's like, you know, there's a benefit there. At least maybe consumers are slowing down and thinking twice because of the amount of awareness. So I think there is like a positive side of it as well. But the negative side in terms of just like your ability to do business at the pace and speed that you want to, you got to realize here you got half of your consumers now that are going to be asking more questions, are going to be more concerned, are going to be wondering, you know, what's real and what's not. And I think being ahead of that and understanding how you're going to have to adjust in order to account for that is going to be pretty important.
I agree. And then you had mentioned it, like the title and the closing side of the business. The title and closing professionals are also seeing things kind of up and to the right, unfortunately. So fraud is increasing. 60% noticed that. 7 out of 10, a little more than that, said they're just becoming more sophisticated. And I think 60% responded or did respond and say it's commonplace right now that we're looking over our shoulder because something wanky is in the pipeline. And I'll get to some examples that we've seen, but it's like this is kind of the unfortunate state of the union right now.
Yeah, fraud is just part of our daily lives. And, it feels like operators are starting to recognize that they've got to account for it in everything that they do.
Tyler, speak to, if you don't mind, our fraud recovery services team, the work we're doing with our federal law enforcement partners, and kind of what the median loss vector kind of looks like in the main 3 buckets: buyer, payoff, and then seller net.
Yeah, so really proud of the work that Certified's fraud recovery services team does. I think Not everybody knows that this is something that we offer and we provide in the market, but we have a team of dedicated specialists that in the event that a business or consumer has fallen victim to a fraud, that we can be kind of the first responders on that case. And so we jump in, we handle crisis communication, we work with the victim, we gather the intel required to then go work directly with the United States Secret Service and the financial institutions that were involved in those transactions, both the sending and receiving banks, to be able to go and try to freeze those accounts and get the funds back. This has been an area of the business that we have continued to grow and continued to lean into, both for the betterment of the industry and folks that have become victims, and also because it supports a much bigger mission, which is that long-term we'd love to not be trying to help people recover when it's stolen, but being more proactive to try to eliminate the fraud to begin with. But that like really rich data of when the real fraud actually occurs and our ability to capture that then enables us to actually be smarter and better at the proactive side of Certified's technology business. And so, through this part of our company and offering, last year was just a huge year for recoveries. And what was interesting is that although the losses aren't as high, like buyers and buyer cash to close was significantly the largest area in which we saw recovery assistance required. So, a lot of buyers calling us on a Friday afternoon where they got to the closing table only to find out that they had been tricked into wiring their funds days earlier to a fraudulent account. And these are just some of like the most challenging conversations and heartbreaking moments where, a family thought that they were about to get keys to a home and instead are finding out that they might not ever get their life savings back. And so, we supported, I forget what the actual like total number was, but it was in the hundreds of cases that were like this last year. And then we also supported a number of mortgage payoff frauds and seller proceeds frauds. In both of those cases, you're mostly working with a title company, a law firm that has sent those funds to a fraudulent entity, and still very rampant, I think, in terms of the amounts of attempts. I think what's different on the payoffs and seller proceeds is that, there really are full controls in place, at least for our customers and folks utilizing Certified. You should never fall victim to a mortgage payoff fraud. Like there is ways in which that we offer the ability to both verify payoffs, order payoffs. Like the payoff ecosystem has really been secured, and seller proceeds, has its own issues still with verification, but also has gotten a lot better in terms of your ability to do it if you utilize the right technology and the right processes, and we've been able to help eliminate that fraud vector as well. But we're getting all these FRS cases obviously from a lot of people that aren't certified customers. These are coming in from different businesses that aren't aware of fraud prevention, or in some cases don't even have the right controls in place. But it's really the buyers you feel for, because I think about the AI side of things here, Tom, and when you talk about the phone call that makes it sound like it's coming from a real estate agent or a trusted party, they're the ones that no matter what controls we put in place, no matter how much we tell them to only trust communication that's coming through a secure channel, that phone call could sound really convincing, and nobody's going to be able to tell them not to answer that phone. It's just somebody calling their phone or leaving a voicemail. And so that's where like the proactive education, the being that like consultative guide, and also partnering with your real estate agents to get that education out as early as possible, I think is really, really critical, because the buyers are the ones that I think are and will continue to be the most vulnerable to this type of attack.
I remember not too long ago, the first report where the median loss of a buyer was like $85,000. And on the onset of just more cash transactions to secure property in a tight market like we have, and with the appreciation, I remember seller proceeds was hanging around 175 for the longest time, and we just had this like step up on the consumer side. and you get the report. I see them all the time, every day. I mean, it's just a constant thread of folks that have been victimized.
Well, one thing too on the amount, what the interesting insight that I had there is that yes, I do believe that like market impacts are driving those amounts to be a lot higher, but I also believe that in some cases fraudsters are targeting the transactions that are more valuable to them because they have the account, they have like the orchestration is all there. Like, why not go after the account that's $225,000 of the transfer versus the transfer that's only 50 grand? And I actually do believe that they're a little bit more targeted.
Yeah, I could see that as well. That makes sense. The number one threat, I'll give one and then a close 1.1 that I'll voice over. Seller impersonation was reported as kind of the biggest risk next to proceeds, disbursement fraud, then payoff. This was in the minds and the survey participants from the title industry in particular. I think why seller impersonation hit the top of the chart here is it's probably the most visible on the front end. So a lot of times when we're made aware of a fraud, Tyler alluded to it, buyer shows up to a Friday 4 o'clock and is asked for a check. They say, what are you talking about? I wired Wednesday. Here's the email. Look at this. You look at my phone. And then the whole thing gets exposed. In a lot of ways, the vacant land or the seller vacant, non-owner occupied, whatever we want to class it as, typically can get spotted easily on the front end with a proper identity verification motion. So for those of you know, we also own a large title business, Sun Title. We're averaging at least one a month right now, seller impersonation in the pipeline that we're catching with certified match. So again, I would argue, like Tyler did on the payoff, this is preventable. This is just where you're putting proper identity verification controls leveraged by technology in the workflow, and it should be hard stop at order entry before you pull title. This is solvable.
Yeah, I think that this one, to the title professionals filling out the survey, feels the most scary is sort of when I think about interpreting the data, where it's like this one has a lot of different ways that a bad seller could get in. It's a lot more complex, I think, of like, okay, how would we change the process? Where the other ones feel either like, they're not entirely their problem, which I think we still lean towards sometimes in title, that like the buyer, oh, I did everything that I could. If they get tricked, it's not as much my responsibility. And the other ones feel like they have a little bit tighter controls in place. So that's how I interpreted this. It was like the seller impersonation stuff still feels a little bit out of my grasp. And therefore, so I'm glad you gave the example, because I think that with the right technology and processes, like it can be within your grasp. And if you're feeling this way, like let's have a conversation and figure out a way to help support, those types of businesses to get this one down.
I mean, candidly, there's no regulation or there was no need to verify the seller's identity until closing. There just wasn't. So there's this whole gap where rather than like end of funnel, we're going beginning of funnel. And, I stand here today thinking in the next 12 to 18 months, I think the table stakes and the requirement is going to be identity verification on every party to a transaction before we start. I don't know why in this most valuable asset category, infrequent transaction cycle for consumers, that we as an industry aren't just leaning in saying, you know what, let's just lift the hood, make sure everybody is who they say they are, and then we'll continue down with the standard process of doing an order. So
save you a lot of time and headache if they turn out to be fraudulent at the end of the deal.
So let's just talk, so this is how I explain this to brokers and agents, right? Because with everything, there's a requirement and then there's like friction, right? So you have technology or friction. I have I'm upgrading my standard operating procedure to protect everybody from seller impersonation fraud, not only me as the dispersing agent or dispersing agents that our customers are certified. And what I say is just simple, guys, everything is fine until it's not. Yeah. And that's different than missing a proration. That's different than missing a second mortgage. That's different than a water bill that wasn't called upon because there was a deferred assessment. I mean, it's a completely different landscape. And if we think mortgage payoff fraud has a long notice tail, seller impersonation could be months or years. And I think you're right, Tyler. Maybe it is because that's the one that really requires a different way to look at process and procedure because of the transaction type and the unique risk. All right, what did consumers say? So Tyler, 80,000 feet before we jump into the slides. What stood out to you most as you read the report from a consumer segment standpoint?
I think the awareness, like, a lot of this I think can sometimes feel like a scorecard for us when I get these reports back, and a scorecard for the industry. And I think there's areas where we do have to give the industry a lot of credit, and the work that Alta's done and the work that even some of our competitors and folks have done to educate, because the awareness is there. And there are more than ever folks feeling as though, like, and maybe the fraudsters are doing some of this for us as well, just with like the amount of stuff that is hitting their inboxes. But I think consumers know there's a fraud problem. And I think like that acknowledgement and that kind of ramp that we've seen in that level of awareness, I think was like the biggest thing that stood out for me. And then I won't jump to the other one, but I'll highlight it when it comes up, because I do want to talk about one other key point here.
So just to backfill, I think that's an interesting perspective, and I couldn't agree more, and I couldn't say it better. So we mentioned earlier that 8 out of 10 are aware, right? But if we cut that generationally, what I find interesting, if you really look at the transaction cycle right now on residential purchase, the baby boomers are selling to the millennial and the Gen Z generation, right? So it's like grandparents selling to grandchildren of some age. And Xers like me are just kind of stuck doing family and work, right? So we're just getting through this thing that we call the family life cycle. And it's interesting, and I think they're more digitally native. So as you think about the first-time home buyer, the way I look at this to say, even if they're not asking the question of you, or they're not asking the question of their real estate or their mortgage professional that's representing them or their attorney, they know. They know. They know it's out there, and they're probably in the back of their mind thinking, how do I protect myself, because nobody's mentioned this so far, right? And then it just kind of, and I think this just tracks digital awareness or digital usage. You want to take this one, or I will, Tyler? You tell me. This, I love this stat.
I mean, I just want to hit on what we just talked about, though, because I do think it's important here of like, and it ties back a little bit to FRS too, honestly, is that like, although, I said that awareness and the awareness is important, I think we can only, give ourselves a pat on the back for a minute and then realize that like awareness isn't enough. Right. And that's because, and the reason why I say it ties back into FRS is like, how many calls have we had? How many people have we had that have been like executives at Google, executives at like really impressive places, IT professionals, security professionals that said to us, I knew that there could be a problem. I should have known. I feel like there was a part of me that like, I thought about this as I went into the transaction, and then they still get tricked. And
yes.
So I think that like,
yes.
I look at this slide and I think, okay, great, everyone's aware, but like, that doesn't mean you're not gonna fall victim. And right. So in, the next part of this, when we really do think about how we can transition that awareness or leverage that awareness to now make sure people don't get tricked, I think is the really important next step for us as an industry.
I think of it that like emotion overrides education at the 1 yard line.
Totally.
And because this is such an emotional transaction on either side, that when it's threatened, it just has this override effect. And you hear it like, shame on me, because to your point, guys, this isn't a, somebody that's not aware of, these are some of the most advanced cybersecurity professionals in the country coming to us saying, I lost $1 million on my down payment or my cash to close wire or whatever. What this slide here says to me is, what would make, so what does trust look like as it relates to the consumer? In years past, this response was led by education and awareness. Now they want to be protected. They want to make sure that this is not happening in this transaction that I'm aware there could be a risk in and that I'm involved with, because after all, what are you guys doing then? And I think of the seller's disclosure and the title commitment and the survey and the home inspection and all the things that you do to like make sure land title and the condition of the property is what people say it is. But they're saying, okay, I appreciate you telling me that I could be at risk. How are you protecting me from that? And that's what this slide, because this was a jump up from years past.
100%. And I think like sometimes we fall victim to looking at things as like, well, how we did it before and how we'll do it differently. But you got to remember, from a consumer point of view, every interaction, every experience that we're providing in real estate is being judged against every experience that they have on their iPhone with another digital platform or with somebody else that's going to help them guide them through, you know, another financial decision or a financial advisor or whatever it might be. And now we are so inundated with these different, you know, trust me, and consumers are just getting smarter to say like, okay, not everything is created equal. And if I am going to trust you, I have some of my own needs and expectations of what you better be able to deliver and back that up as either an individual practitioner, as a business, as a brand. Expectations are just high for a consumer, and they should be. We have so many options, right? And I think with that optionality and with that ability to go into Chat GPT and say, which of these should I pick and who's better, and everything's getting compared, the only way you're going to be able to like really fulfill that consumer's expectation is if you can back it up. And I think that's what this slide really showed to me, is that those expectations are just growing.
Completely agree. And to back that, I thought this was interesting. They're saying, look, and I would expect that layer of guarantee, that layer of insurance, that layer, that warm, secure blanket that gets me all the way to the closing table where my funds arrived and I get possession with keys and a garage door opener and the code to the security system, I'd expect to pay for that, right? So we tested kind of the bands of that, and I just thought it's interesting. And I think
even the way, I got to cut you off, because even the way that you described that, like, I expect to pay for that. This is where I think we go wrong. And this was the other thing that got me the most excited, because what I think as an industry we've done is, you know, it's like, oh, I'll ask for it at the last minute. Like, oh, here's one more charge, or, you know, kind of try to bury the lead of like, oh, I hope they don't see that we're going to charge them to keep them secure. And I think we could be doing such a better job if we were collectively as an industry saying, we're going to be your trusted guide. This is such an important experience for you and your family, but we're going to be honest with you, like, fraudsters are coming for this money. We've put proper processes and technology and communication in place because we want to keep you and your money safe, and we want to get you into that home. And if we were more confident in like that delivery, and then we followed through with it, these consumers would not only be willing to pay for it like they've told us, but they would be like thanking you at the end of it that this was part of the experience. And I just feel like that shift from like defensiveness of like, oh, I hope that they don't, you know, recognize, or oh, it's going to be one more charge, to like, we're creating value for you and your family, and that value far exceeds what 17% of people say they pay $200. Like, I know what we charge, I know what other products charge. You don't even have to charge them $200. It could be a lot cheaper than that, and you can still provide this unbelievable point of value and a point of opportunity for them to really look at you as that guide, as someone that they trust. And this is the part that gets me really passionate, because I just feel like if we could collectively turn from that defensive position to offensive position, the consumers would feel better, the transaction would go better, and we could really be in a different state as an industry of sort of leading this charge.
Well, I think it's a fair point. It's an up level because the industry has not done a good job, even with the title insurance premium or the closing fee itself, on the value exchange between seller to buyer. What does an expanded owner policy actually mean? and what protection am I getting between those two, and why isn't that covered in this whole fraud thing anyway, right? Because
well, and I get it. I mean, I'd be curious from your perspective, if you put your Sun Title hat on, like we get the feedback a lot where it's like, well, if I charge $20 more, I'm going to lose business to my biggest competitor. Like, and I know some markets are a lot more price sensitive to that approach, but how do you feel? Like in your market as an owner, like where do you have pricing power? And I know you've obviously leaned into certified, but like, how do you think about it for your business?
We think about it as price and value. And if you educate consumers, and to your point, you have to start with the referral partners, actually. You start with the referral partners and you get them to identify that what we're doing is proactively much better than what we'll have to do reactively. We have to do this thing, right? Yeah. We launched an unapologetically secure campaign a little over a year ago. And when I say we went and we added the certified fee to every single file going out of our office, when I say we got zero pushback, I honestly, Tyler, I took fewer than a half a dozen calls. They were from our largest clients. All they wanted to confirm was, just remind me again what this is so I know how to explain it. We created the go-to-market collateral so that at the listing or agency creation, they're able to explain it. And now our customers are competing against other agents and lenders and legal relationships, because through certified, we have this offering of exactly what is in the mind of the consumer, but they don't know how to articulate it.
Right. And like this should be that wake-up call to say, look, your consumers are saying they're willing to do it. You got to show up at their front door with the right offering and the value's there.
Yeah. Yep. You package it. I think it's about a package and delivery, and we're trying to make and defer that equity to the referral partner that gets the lift, right? That uplift should come directly from the real estate agent that's like, you know what? And I'm protecting your email, and I'm protecting your private information because of the work that I've done to secure communications, and your funds are going to be insured end to end in the transaction.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And we've had social proof against that, where people are like, man, I knew I was competing against 3 other agents, and then I mentioned that, and it's one data point.
Sure.
They're like, nobody's talking about that. Like, that seems pretty important.
Yeah. That's awesome.
You know, the education gap, I agree with you. I think in a blender, the Fraudster, the news media, Alta, NAR, MBA, the ABA, all of us are doing our work to try to get that to a ground level. But it's interesting that they still believe the real estate professional is the one that carries the burden of this education. And I think that's right. We have to understand. I was going to
say, as they should, right? Like,
as they should, right?
You're aware of a problem that could come up, and then it like doesn't get mentioned by the person that you are looking to guide them through that transaction. That's what this data told me, was like, there's a lot more consumers that are aware of the problem, but then they're not feeling like the person that they would expect to acknowledge it and address it with them is actually doing that. And I think that's why we call this the education gap, because I feel like, there's such an opportunity. And if you bridge all 3 of these, they're aware, they're willing to pay for it, and they're looking for you for guidance, you can see the pattern and the thread here that you would be set up for a lot of success as, someone that they would rely on moving forward if you did it right.
And that's what putting my title owner hat back on, that's what we've leveraged, is to say, hey, real estate agent, let's arm you with that narrative. This becomes part of the lexicon as you're over the kitchen table and part of the offering, and it's meeting them square where they are. It's a big opportunity, and they can be the hero in that. This I've summarized as the security arbitrage. So this one, if you think about statistically how far these bookends are away, a minus 56 to a positive 68. So in the negative, we are at risk that almost 6 out of 10 consumers say, if there was an incident, even if I was made whole, I'm not doing business with any of those people again, because after all, if we go back to the previous slide, it shouldn't have happened. They believe it shouldn't have happened. And the flip side, which is way over on the other side, says, boy, if I was educated and there was a guarantee, and again, I am protected, 7 out of 10 would move in that direction. So they're running from you or they're running to you. There's not a gap in this stat. This is one of the most powerful slides to anchor this idea that go out in your community and show the real estate agents what you're doing and what they can do by extension in the conversations they're having with buyers and sellers. This is one of my favorite like feedback slides in the report. How do you?
I don't have anything to add. I mean, it's clear right there, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that this should really be an eye opener for our listeners.
Yep. Let's look at, Tyler, I'll have you go through just what we're doing at Certified and some of the things that we saw at scale as we wrapped up 2025.
Yeah, I mean, we've hit on a lot of this already, so I think that I'll just kind of breeze through some of these. But look, in 2025, we were involved in nearly 1.5 million residential real estate transactions. And when we think about, dollars protected, the 283 million, that's not truly like every dollar that we saw flow. Those are dollars that were about to be sent to a fraudster. Like those are dollars that we held from landing in a fraudulent account, like money that would have been gone. So I want to be very, very clear that that was like saved at the nick of time. And that correlates to more than 1,000 attempts that were blocked. And so, we at all times are monitoring every single interaction on our platform, every single identity, every single login, every single bank account, email address, phone number, looking for any marker that we can to determine that there's risk. And even in scenarios where a transaction started looking really good and everyone was clean, and then 15 days into it, something changed. We have that ability at all times to be monitoring and verifying and securing the deal. And I think, that's the foundation that we've created at Certified that's so unique and gives me a lot of confidence in what we'll be able to do long term, even as fraudsters adapt to more scalability with AI, more sophistication with AI, because we just have such a strong foundation in the data and our analysis and the way that we use AI in our models to be able to predict if a transaction is potentially going to be fraudulent. And so it's just been really fun to see the technology evolve and adapt and what our team's been able to do, especially as our volume has increased in terms of the amount of transactions we've been involved in. So that's been awesome. I think, when we look at just the feedback that we get in market, it's great in terms of just how effective we've been able to be, really trying to stay ahead of the curve and really trying to get in a workflow where, we truly are embedded into every single transaction. And so with our support of our customers, and like we really pride ourselves on getting in the dirt with them. Like we want to understand how their business operates, and every customer we don't treat the same. Like they are all have nuance to what they do and what softwares that they use and what their processes look like. And the only way for us to be an effective partner is to really meet them where they are. And so we want to be that truly like business partner. And I think our evolution as a business has really been one from like, we can just help like lock it down and keep it secure, to now you're starting to see us be able to really be the partner that can actually make your business more seamless and the workflow more automated, but also at the highest level of security possible. And I think it's been fun to see our team take on that challenge and that growth journey alongside our customers and really informed by feedback from our customers. But I think, where we get this right as a team, both us and our customers, is when their business is performing at a high level and they feel really confident that they're safe and secure because of what our software is able to help them do and help their teams and their clients do in order to automate those experiences, but also keep everybody super safe. We hit on recovery a little bit. I'll share just a little bit more here. So since 2021, we've supported nearly 800 victims. We've recovered almost $120 million, and we have a really high recovery rate. That's one of those stats that, like, you know, you don't want everybody to know, because we don't want people to think that recovery is an easy fallback, because it's not. And believe me, like the 31% that don't get recovered, it's not worth the risk of falling into that category. It is very, very challenging, even with these sorts of numbers, to perform a recovery. And I'll say that this year especially, I know we're looking at a lot of 2025 data, but just in the start of 2026, we're seeing new attacks and more fraud, and ways in which that, you know, account takeovers are becoming really, really dramatic in terms of their impact on businesses. And so I think, you know, again, proud of the work that we've done in recovery. If you ever have a fraud, we definitely want to be your first call. I believe that we can put a ton of weight into trying to help you get your funds back, but do not rely on that as a strategy. That should truly be for those who are not as proactive as you listening to this call and being here. But it is a testament just to the work that we've done, and the partnership that we have with the Secret Service, and our ability to be able to support in those. I don't know if, you know, we share quite a few recovery stories. I know we're getting close to time. I don't know if we want to go into this particular story itself, or you know,
it's just a compressed motion. I think the industry and the underwriters have continued to call upon us in our relationship with federal law enforcement, and that channel will remain open. And we've had people. This is just a kind of a summary or a download of people don't have a proper incident response, and that burns critical minutes right now as we think about the speed at which money is moving, and will continue to be that last, not the last resort, but that guardian, if you will, that's standing at the gate saying, you know, let us know what's going on, and we'll drop everything to make sure that that we can try to minimize that loss through the partnerships with receiving banks and federal law enforcement.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, because I think that the call out here is just that speed matters. And although those might be impressive stats for how fast we were able to get this particular individual's funds returned, we know that not every case is that way. But if you are aware of a victim, you got to move fast. And we're very fortunate to have great partners at a number of underwriters across the country who now like lean on us. And you know, when you get a call, it's unfortunate. You're like, okay, this is likely going to be about a fraud, but like, we're here to answer, and we're going to try to support. And in that case, you know, moving fast, and that relationship that I talked about between agent and underwriter and certified and your client, like, the faster we can move together and we can coordinate, the more likely we are going to be to be able to get a recovery. So this is definitely an exciting, you know, story, and one that we're proud of, and it was definitely a feel good. But I think the real hero of that story is just the communication and coordination amongst parties in this industry.
Yeah. All right, let's recap real quick. We talked about it. It's here. It's in our workflow, and fraud is only going to continue to get more sophisticated, harder to detect. And at the same time, the consumers are looking for their professionals to protect them end to end in the transaction, not just through the flow of money, but every other right that they've hired somebody to protect or insure against.
I'm taking number 3. They will pay for it. Consumers will pay for it.
Yes.
We got to get out
loud
there.
And proud. Go out and say we're doing something. See, we're doing something.
Help them, see the value, but they will pay for it. And if you are loud and proud about the value that you provide, you're going to start to see people choosing your business over others.
Yeah, be bold and lead your community, because you will create a competitive edge on your referral partners. We've seen that. It's not just in our business, but other certified customers that are taking that, saying, you know what, absolutely. You know, title insurance is, you know, that's bottled water on the same shelf at the same price. And what edge do you have to really be a strategic partner with your referral partners? And this is one of them. And call us if there's a problem, but disaster recovery and having an incident response that is pre-vetted and you guys can do kind of in your sleep is just so important. So the full report is online at our website. It's free, and use it. Share this with your team. Share this with those that are relying on you from a referral standpoint. Even buyers and sellers should be aware that you're doing something, and that's why we do this. So, Tyler, any parting thoughts? This was great conversation.
This was awesome, Tom. Thanks for having me. And I do love this sort of parting slide, because I do just think that we got to remember the consumer and who we service and what a life-changing moment this is. And I think that sometimes it's easy to take for granted the role that we play in making it a special and safe and great journey for these consumers. And I just hope that we can continue to work together as an industry to protect it and create a positive impact in the fight against fraud.
Yeah. Tyler, thank you as always, man. Love you. And just what a great mission and team that's been assembled at Certified to take this to them every day. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Couldn't do without you, man. I appreciate this. This was a lot of fun, and looking forward to maybe you'll invite me back next year. We'll see.
We'll see, man. We got a long lineup. We'll see. All right. With that, guys, we're going to sign off. We'll see you on next month's session. Take care.